What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to For the Millie Main Slate Breakdown, Thursday Night Football Showdown Breakdown, these Jets and Patriots, and then a bunch of pick six discussion as well. We're not going to talk too much about the main slate. We're basically going to run through the pieces of news that we think, number one, are the most important to the slate, but also could affect ownership the most. We're going to talk a little bit about where we hope ownership goes, and then we'll also give some candidates for our slate breakers, which we always give out on the Sunday morning show. And then Thursday Night Football, sometimes we get some really exciting games. Sometimes we get Jets, Patriots. But TwoGun, what are you looking forward to the most?
I'll just say, I don't know why. I've been looking forward to this game. I love, but I'm weird, so.
I think it's because you know that there's one side that people have guys that they want to root for, like Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, and then there's the other side where no one wants to root for them, and that seems to be your kind of team.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love rooting for Jacoby Reset Stacks.
There you go. Welcome, Brett. Welcome, Albert. You two are always in here. We appreciate it very much. Anybody else watching, if you want to jump into the YouTube chat, you can ask questions. You can just kind of hang out and have some fun with everybody, whatever you want to do. But we very much appreciate if you all move into the YouTube chat if you're currently watching over on Twitter or anything like that. But TwoGun, let's start with some main slate stuff. And actually where I want to start is all of a sudden, George Kittle misses practice. George Kittle's now very, very iffy for this Sunday's game. So they could potentially be without McCaffrey, Debo, and Kittle. Goodness, the ownership percentage on Mason and on Ayuk might be through the roof.
Yeah, especially on Mason. It might be insane, especially after everyone saw the Rams get steamrolled last weekend. We'll see. I'm always hesitant I'm hesitant to play chalk, but I'm far more interested. If I'm going to eat the mega chalk, I'm far more interested in the Cam Akers potential mega chalk. Yeah. He's like 4,700 or 4,800, something like. He's up to 5K. And if both Dameon Pierce and Joe Mixon miss, to me that's just kind of a no-brainer. Throw them in, but of course, at least it's a potential slate breaker in that game too that we can talk about.
TwoGun, I'm a sucker for a good username, and the Harry Snowman is about as good as it gets. So thank you as well for tuning in, and well done on the username. But yeah, I think you're right about the chalk surrounding Cam Akers. I'll actually give a counterpoint there, which is I can't see a scenario in which Jordan Mason, for example, doesn't have a strong yardage total, doesn't have a good chance of scoring a touchdown this coming weekend. But if Cam Akers is the starter, I could very much see Houston just throw the ball all game long. That would make Akers very touchdown dependent. If he doesn't score, if Minnesota's defense continues to play really well, I could see a super cheap Cam Akers failing pretty spectacularly for everybody. So I think I'd actually lean towards the Akers fade, maybe even before the Mason fade, particularly because we've got some of those Houston receivers really popping early on in the GPP scores. Nico Collins near the top. So we'll definitely talk more about Collins, but any stacks for this main slate that have already caught your eye, either for pick six or just the standard DFS slate?
So it's funny because I talked about how much I like the Cam Akers chalk. I actually like Nico Collins as a slate baker and just like stacking that game in general. I like stacking game in pick six. I like stacking that game in regular DFS with the passers and the receivers. It has high GPP scores. In general, it's almost like a no-brainer way to go, and everyone's just going to, maybe take Cam Akers and that's it, and hope he does more than he's really able to do. And the other way I like it is just totally off the wall, which is Tyreek Hill, who can always just break a slate. And he's going to be like, you never get sub 2% Tyreek Hill ownership, and he had a bad game last game. It's just perfect for the 40-point weird Tyreek game, and he's the one that, because it's like Jordan Mason got there last week, but he didn't break the slate by any means. If he didn't get that 10-yard rush for a touchdown, he would have been kind of bad. But Alvin Kamara broke the slate. Who knows who'll break the slate, but it could be Tyreek Hill, and to whichever case is like, what?
No, it's a good point. I want to say to everyone out there, particularly if you're a subscriber and you're already starting to look at the GPP scores and start to build your lineups, it is worth noting ownership is very uncertain right now. It's not just Kittle. It's kind of just the whole slate. As ownership changes, GPP scores are going to change. So just because someone's popping in the GPP scores right now doesn't mean they're going to end up popping. Just because someone's not doesn't mean they won't end up looking great in the GPP scores. Now, that said, the quarterback with the highest GPP score right now is from that same game. You mentioned Tyreek Hill. Geno Smith right now has the highest GPP score. DK Metcalf's is really good. Devon Achane also has a really strong GPP score coming back. We were all over Metcalf in week 1. Talk about being a week early. He goes 3 receptions, 29 yards in week 1, then 10 for 129 and a 56-yard touchdown against a New England team that we thought would be great once again against wide receiver 1. So certainly don't mind going right back to Metcalf if his ownership stays down. And right now it looks like it will stay under control. So I think Geno, DK Metcalf, and Devon Achane as the bring back looks pretty damn strong right now.
Yeah, it might be a sneaky game to stack this week. We'll see.
Yeah, particularly because I think one thing we'd agree on is like the Tua injury might be super impactful for Miami. I think the way in which it's most likely to be impactful is I don't think they'll be able to string together the long sustained drives the way they have been with him. But I think we might still see the explosive plays. We might still see a slant to Tyreek Hill where he takes it another 80 yards. We might see Devon Achane break a wide receiver screen with him split out wide for a long touchdown. And if you get those explosive plays, then you get extra play volume for your Seattle stack. So I agree. I think that game could be potential fantasy fireworks. So certainly some interest there. Any running backs that have caught your eye so far? Because I have one that is kind of teetering on the line of maybe being chalky, maybe not. And if he's not chalk, I would absolutely love him.
Well, I think, yeah, it's interesting because there might be such mega chalk running backs that's where, what should be chalky ends up being way, under rostered. So I don't think I have one yet that I really love.
Okay. I'll give you, so we just mentioned that Seattle game. I think Charbonnet has a chance to be really, really popular again. And the more popular he becomes, the more ownership I think he would steal away from Tony Pollard. $6,000. Pollard has been really effective so far. He's got 144 rushing yards in 2 games, a touchdown. He's also caught 8 balls, 52 yards on 10 targets. He's been a really big part of this offense, and they faced 2 strong defenses, Chicago and the Jets. Now they get a Green Bay team that has been shredded on the ground in both games. Indianapolis, I think, was borderline really, really stupid in that second half to not continue feeding Jonathan Taylor. I think Taylor ended up with 12 carries, 103 yards. And that was only with a long of 29 yards. So it was like every single time he was touching the ball, he was ripping off chunks, and they just totally went away from it in a game where they only allowed 16 points. It's not like they were in some game script where they couldn't possibly continue to run it. So I think Tennessee will not take that approach.
Find ways to lose,
Yeah. Yeah, and particularly speak of finding ways to lose, Will Levis has found ways to make Tennessee lose. So I think we will absolutely see a game plan for Tennessee centered around keeping the ball on the ground as much as they can. And I think Tony Pollard is potentially in for a really big day. So I'm hopeful that his ownership creeps down a little bit. And if it does,
it's Tony Pollard. It's the Titans. Don't worry about it. He'll definitely be pretty low. Yeah, I think that's I already love it. To be honest, that's not going to be a popular play. It's not. Yeah. I mean, it's probably my favorite guy. I'm gonna go ahead and steal it and start running about it and act like I thought of it on my own.
Well, let's hope that we don't talk about him too much and end up seeing a 20% Pollard on Sunday morning. But
I think people don't respect me enough to roster him. You're like, I don't know, the 2-gun play. I don't have too many 2-gun plays.
We're trying to change that one show at a time here. Albert asks, along the same line of Pollard, what do you think of Alexander Mattison? The thing that I like about it is that it seems like Zamir White is catching a little bit of attention, and it's weird. Like in week 1, Mattison seemed to like the better of the 2 plays. He got more snaps, only had 5 carries, but caught 4 balls for 43 and a 31-yard touchdown. And so there was maybe some thought that maybe Mattison is just going to pass Zamir White in the backfield. But then in week 2, it seemed to swing back to Zamir White. Now, they still haven't been able to run the ball a whole lot. They were playing Baltimore. They're playing from behind a decent amount of that game. So it wasn't surprising to see, but White only 9 carries and Mattison well below that. But then White also had more targets this past game. So I think there's enough of a chance that it just swings back to Madison. Again, all the coach speak out of Las Vegas has been that they're just going to ride the hot hand. So if it happens to be Madison, there's a good chance of that happening. But I'd say for me to be truly interested in that, we'd have to see Zamir White not just be 10 to 15%, but he'd have to get to like 25, 30% range where leveraging White in and of itself is valuable.
Yeah, I'm not playing Madison yet. I actually have a ton of Madison in best ball. I hope he does well, but we need him to be the lead back or Zamir White be injured before really playing him in DFS. It's just, come on. There's too many other players that are better or that have.
How about this hot take from Brian? Upset of the week, Panthers money line. Let's take this in two ways. What do you think of the call, Panthers money line? And then two, what's your interest level in some of these Carolina skill guys now that it's no longer Bryce Young and it's Andy Dalton? Because I think Chuba Hubbard, Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, all cheap enough to potentially be viable as long as they're not steamed too much. Maybe even talk about the punt tight ends.
Look, if you're asking the old guy, if he likes the old guy veteran quarterback coming back, of course I like the old veteran guy quarterback coming back. Of course I like the Panthers money line. In some weird way, I wonder how chalky Deontay Johnson will end up being. It might spook me off of him a little bit, but probably not. I don't know, like what it's like the one time that, Dalton played, he threw the ball 50 times, so he put up points. Yeah. So that might bring in too much ownership on him, but it's Andy Dalton and the Panthers. Like, are people seriously going to run to him like I am? I don't know. We'll see.
I will say, talk about stacks. Now, this might be a better pick six stack because the lines
I definitely like the pick six over
the projections are going to be low. But yeah, I think on pick six, I'd be very interested in doing Minshew, Bowers, Adams, Dalton, Thielen, Deontay, more on all of them, and hope you get the 6 for 6 that way. So I will almost certainly be playing that. Maybe I shouldn't say that because now we're all going to get decreased payouts with it, but I think that's a strong way to go for the main slate on pick six.
Yeah, for sure. And the main slate on pick six, people have so many different picks that you're generally don't get it generally ends up being around the average.
Yeah.
It's not like these island games where one or two players really swings the payout multiple. And we can go ahead and start to talk about that with this game. I think everyone's going to be running backs over. And I don't even know if they're going to touch Jacoby Brissett in the passing. I don't think they're going to really be doing the unders on the New England. They're just not going to be touching them as much. I think people are going to generally like to hit the overs on Ramondre, maybe Gibson, even for rushing yards because he rushed a lot last game. Definitely Breece Hall. They're probably going to hit that 98, 99 yards total reception. That's my guess. I don't know for sure. Because the funny thing is people in Showdown are probably going to be just doing running backs, defense kickers primarily. Maybe Garrett Wilson will be – Garrett Wilson on Showdown. I can see Garrett Wilson getting the over as well. That's my guess. So to hit those big pick six payouts, I'm thinking you want running backs under and just choose some random players to go to win. I don't think if you choose Demario Douglas over or Jalen Polk, it doesn't matter which guys you win with. It's more that everyone's going to be having those overs on those running backs that need to lose to get that mega payout.
Yeah, I'm actually going to take a slightly different direction. Let's bring up the pick six picks. I think that there are two guys. We already kind of mentioned this. I think there are two guys in this game that people enjoy rooting for: Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. So I think the two most common picks that we'll see are more on Garrett Wilson, 66.5 receiving yards, and then more on Breece Hall in some way. So let's see what are the exact picks that you can take for Breece. You can go. I think we'll see a lot of more on 98.5 rushing plus receiving. I think we'll see a lot of more on 66.5 rush yards. And I think we'll see a lot of more on 31.5 receiving yards. So I think a really nice place to start might actually be less on Garrett Wilson, 66.5 receiving yards, less on Breece Hall, 98.5 rushing plus receiving. And if you're doing that, then you probably want a more pick on Braylon Allen. You probably want a more pick on Mike Williams, Allen Lazard, Tyler Conklin, someone along those lines. But I think that's going to be kind of the heart and soul of my pick six play tonight.
I mean, I'm all over the place with pick six today. It's funny because I don't know if you're aware, DraftKings is doing this leaderboard where if you do an entry of $50 or more and you get it right, you get a certain amount of points. You get 64 points for a perfect pick six, 32 for a pick five, etc. So it kind of makes like if you're gonna do like $300 of picks, it's better to do like $6, $5, $50 ones to be more eligible for the leaderboard because it's like some good prizes. I'm definitely gonna try to get that top prize for $10,000 of pick six credits. But I don't always just take, if I'm doing Garrett Wilson under, I might just not take any other like guess about like the other yardage on the receivers, or I might take just an under just on the passing offense in general. Like I might take an under on Aaron Rodgers and an under on him. I generally like Mike Williams over, and I like Mike Williams. Obviously, I did learn my lesson from a couple weeks ago. I like Mike Williams in general. His snap count went up a lot last week.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's truly back yet, but first week he had 19% of snaps. Then he had 65%. We have to assume he's probably going to have at least 65% again.
Mm-hmm.
He's only going to get more involved in the game. So I love his over. He's really priced for like a 30% snap count there.
Yeah.
So he's also independent of Garrett Wilson. And I don't like Garrett Wilson independent of Mike Williams.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'll go in the same direction with him, and I'll stack it with Aaron Rodgers. If I'm doing Aaron Rodgers over and Mike Williams over, I might do the Garrett Wilson over other as well. Just it correlates, so might as well.
That it definitely does. I think I might like Mike Williams even more in showdown than I do pick six, because if Mike Williams has a good game, it's so likely to come along with a touchdown, which steals a touchdown from Garrett Wilson, steals a touchdown from Breece Hall, that I think that's probably my preferred route. But man, honestly, if you're not using Garrett or Breece on this showdown slate, you're going to have trouble using all of your salary. So I don't quite know exactly how I want to attack this showdown slate yet.
Yeah, it's funny. I have Mike Williams in showdown a good amount, but I'm generally using it on lineups that are in the contest with more entries. Mm-hmm. Like I generally probably want Mike Williams at least in 100 entry contest, preferably in like a 500 plus entry contest. Because if I have him at captain, I might be the only person that has him at captain, besides maybe some two-gun truther that's listening to the show. So, and if he just ends up busting again, it doesn't really, that lineup. That line is all or nothing, anyways. Whereas when you're playing some of these smaller showdowns, it's like with the 20 or the 50 or the 100, like less than 100. You don't necessarily have to go that crazy with a Mike Williams captain type situation. But the player I like the most, it's funny because I generally just like creating passing offenses, like passing lineups. Whether it's like very few people are going to have Jacoby Brissett and Aaron Rodgers in their lineups. Very few people are going to have Jacoby Brissett, period, in their lineups. I mean, he's definitely the player I'm most leveraged to is Jacoby Brissett, because no one wants to use him, and everyone just assumes he's going to do nothing. The other thing is, I think people are going to have a lot of Jets defense, which Jacoby Brissett doesn't really seem to be turning the ball over that much or even taking that many sacks. So that's definitely kind of a route I want to fade. It'll be interesting to see how people are building their lineups. My guess is we see a lot of like 4-2 Jets with the bring back being Ramondre Stevenson and or Antonio Gibson. And that's just kind of the lineup I'm trying to fade here. I'm either having a lot more Pats or I'm having passing from both teams.
I really like that last point that we're going to see. I think we're going to see like a very predictable way in which people choose between Stevenson and Gibson, where if the lineup is favoring the Jets, they're going to play Gibson, and if the lineup kind of implies that the Patriots are going to be surprisingly effective in this game and maybe even not just compete, but potentially win the game. We'll see an edge towards Stevenson. So I think kind of bucking that trend just makes a lot of sense in and of itself.
Yeah, I just think like almost everyone's going to have Gibson or Stevenson. An interesting route is Jacoby Brissett and two of his pass catchers. Neither of them. Now, keep in mind, I do have Jacoby Brissett with Stevenson in some lineups that are just like more like pass winning the game type lineups. But in the weird, like this ends up being some sort of weird shootout, like a 3-3 type situation, I'll have Aaron Rodgers, Jacoby Brissett, and two pass catchers from each team. Yeah. And just completely ignoring Ramondre Stevenson and probably Breece Hall too.
Yeah, I like that. I'll tell you who my favorite captain is. This might be a little bit off the board, but I think it's Hunter Henry. And shout out to Brian for saying the exact same thing. Reason I love Hunter Henry so much, his weighted opportunity rating is over 0.7 so far this year. If you're not familiar with weighted opportunity rating, this is a number that's solid for wide receiver ones. So he really has just dominated opportunity, and that's what it is. It's a combination of target share and air yard share. So he has been the favorite target in every way for Jacoby Brissett. And historically, this guy's a touchdown machine. He scores touchdowns even when it's Mac Jones throwing to him. So I think Henry has a really, really good chance of scoring tonight. And just kind of, if he has 6 for 60 and a touchdown in a low-scoring game, there's a very good chance that that's the optimal captain. So I love Hunter Henry on this slate. I'm definitely playing him. It's just a matter of, is he going to be my captain or is he just going to be a flex that I'm using?
Caleb's article basically said, captain anyone besides running back. And I couldn't agree more. I have 8 lineups. I have Ramondre Stevenson as a captain in 1, and every bone in my body wants to change that lineup. It's almost like I'm not doing it just as like a weird hedge, because the rest of the lineup is kind of weird that like I'm okay with it. But everyone's going to put Breece Hall, maybe Ramondre Stevenson, maybe Garrett Wilson as their. And out of the 3, I hate Garrett Wilson the least, because the Breece Hall captain with the Jets beatdown is just so obvious. Like Breece Hall captain, you might have Garrett Wilson in there as well. You probably have the Jets defense. You probably have a kicker, and then you have whatever Ramondre Stevenson. Like, come on, everyone's doing that lineup. I think if one pass catcher has a 50-yard touchdown, he ends up being optimal. It could be Hunter Henry has a game like last game that makes him optimal, or any of these pass catchers on New England, Demario Douglas. It's hard to tell KJ Osborne or Jalen Polk. No one wants to use them. They're so cheap. And if that's the guy that happens to break out, you're probably waiting in a game that has a decent amount of scoring. You're going to win. Like, everyone's stacking. I think everyone's approach to this game is the field goal rushing slugfest, thinking it is definitely going to be a 38-point game or a 35-point game. It's just so basic. It's just, to me, it's very clear pivot on how to approach this game. And keep in mind, this isn't main slate DFS where I'm espousing Jacoby Brissett. Okay, you're not taking Jacoby Brissett against Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen stacks. You're just taking him in one damn game. Okay, that's the big difference, and that's when you can get really kind of stupid with TwoGun shit. Excuse my language. It's in these one games because it's just one game. And we don't need Jacoby Brissett to break the slate. We just need him to outperform, the run game. And that's all we need.
Yeah.
And it's
by the way,
than asking him, like, having him on the main slate.
Yeah.
As a quarterback.
Also, real quick, the DVOA fantasy points against numbers for this Jets defense last year are also pretty telling. 43% below average production allowed to opposing wide receivers, 12% above average to opposing tight ends. So that might have had a lot to do with game script, but also I think it has a lot to do with this New York Jets secondary. So another reason to really like Hunter Henry as the favorite pass receiver, for example, just throw out the position. He's a tight end, but he's basically been the number 1 receiver on the team. And then Deacon asked,
popular, to be honest, because he's expensive. And people are going to be like, oh, that last game was BS. He's not going to do that again.
Mhm.
So, like, I mean, I'm in general, I'm all over I have 8 lineups, and almost all, like, not every single one of them, but I think like 6 or 7 of them are
Yeah.
heavy on the pass game. And I mean, I have Hunter Henry in, I'm trying to like bring up my thing, in close to 2/3 of it. I have him in
I
about
love
2/3 of my lineups, 2/3 of my money. So I
love
think I'm pretty with you on Hunter Henry.
Mhm. Deacon asks, what's the model saying for this game? And anyone who hasn't seen this on Twitter yet, the FTN betting model on Monday night had Atlanta winning 22.6 to 21.3. Final score 22-21, something like that. So I definitely understand why why he's asking this. That said, it's not a very fun answer. The model has this game 17.9 to 15.0 in favor of the Jets. A small edge, therefore, on New England against the spread. A really, really large edge, 13.6% on under 39.5. So I'm with you, TwoGun. I think the way to play this is to actually kind of assume for Showdown that there's a little bit more passing success than everybody expects. But man, the model doesn't think that's going to happen. The model thinks this is going to be as ugly as any Thursday night football games that we've seen over the last few years. So hopefully it's wrong in this case.
I will say, though, in the sports betting contests I have New England in basically all of my Westgate ones. Like I took New England plus 6.5. And with these sports betting contests, it's kind of a pain to submit your picks for the Thursday game. You have to really like the game. Otherwise, it makes more sense just to wait till Saturday and submit your picks for the Sunday games. So for Circa, I passed on this game, but yeah, I took 6.5 on everything. So I generally like this Pats team more than people expect. It's just they're not that bad. They're not good, but they're just not that bad. Their defense is decent. Their offense doesn't make mistakes. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying Jacoby Brissett's throwing for 300 yards this game. He might throw for 250 though. And if he throws through 250, like I'm breaking Showdown.
Yeah.
If he throws for 120, I'm gonna lose once again. But I'm used to it, so it's okay.
What do you think of the split between Stevenson and Antonio Gibson? Because 11-4 for Stevenson here on Showdown, 3.6 for Gibson. So I want to go take a look at what we have in our projected flex ownership for these two. We've got Stevenson at 52%, Antonio Gibson 42%. I think question number one is, could you see that flip-flopping? Could you see Gibson actually being the more popular of the two?
Yes, actually I could. I don't think he will, but I can see people taking Gibson as that Pats that they need to plug into the lineup.
Yeah.
Because he's just great salary. Like, are they going to use Antonio Gibson and they're like, oh yeah, he's going to get at least a few touches, or are they going to use Demario Douglas, Jalen Polk in the same range? No, they're all going to go to Antonio Gibson. Me, I'm going to Demario Douglas, Jalen Polk, and KJ Osborne because I'm me. That's what I do. I can't help myself. It's like it's weird. It's like some screwed up addiction. But I can't help myself to fading Antonio Gibson. I just don't like rostering backup running backs, period. And it's because they're going to get 6-7 points? Ooh, like, yeah, he might get you 4 or 5 points. He might not be terrible. He's not going to get you 20. He's not going to be the only way he gets you to, it had some really weird thing where he gets like a touchdown and a weird, it's very rare. And he kind of had a ceiling game last game, and he didn't even catch that. He caught one pass out of the backfield. It's not like his role is, Ramonde's role is secure. But he also had Ramondre Stevenson had 26 touches. It's not like Gibson was splitting work. It's just because Stevenson touched the ball so much, they had to give Gibson some work too. So I just hate it. I hate the Gibson play. He's going to be way overowned. His ceiling is just not there unless it lucks out. So I will let everyone else roster. I have Gibson on one of my 8 lineups. To be clear, it's not like I'm totally fading him, but I'm definitely going to be underweight him. For a guy that's overweight Pats in general, is saying something.
I think you're spot on. I think it's a really good point. I think the best point is that when you think of Antonio Gibson, you think of the guy, in a negative game script, he's really going to benefit. They're going to target him a bunch. his great game came 11 carries, 96 yards, 1 reception on 1 target for 7 yards. So yeah, I think the ceiling might not be worth it. And again, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I think it's almost smarter to not think about it as like what's the ownership difference between Gibson and Stevenson, and rather think what is the ownership difference in the type of lineup that I'm running. Because again, New England heavy lineups, Stevenson is going to be super popular. In lineups where people are going heavy on the Jets, they're captaining either Hall or Garrett Wilson, also using the other one. There's not a lot of salary left for Stevenson, and Gibson really helps make that kind of double stud for the Jets lineup work. So I think in that type of lineup, we will see a lot more of Antonio Gibson than Ramondre. So if you can find a way to reverse that in your own lineup, I think that's a sharp way to build.
I mean, that's basically, I'm fading that lineup. That is my goal. That is my strategy today. If I'm fading that lineup. So it's very possible that lineup just smacks me down. But like I said, I like to be first or last. I don't like, ending up in the middle.
Yeah.
And these showdown slates, it's kind of easier to be first or last.
Yep.
It's it's just easier because there's less variables at play. It's not, oh, my guys did well, but this one other guy in some other game happened to do better.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen in these games. So it's just a little bit easier to make your lineups stand out one way or another, which is probably why I had success last year at Showdown.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out what is the lineup that everybody else is running and what game script is going to make that fail. And if we get that game script that makes that fail, what is going to succeed? You basically, therefore, just have to be right about one thing. If you're right about that one thing, you get a really nice payout. That's exactly what we're going for. Any other showdown thoughts? Any other pick six thoughts that you want to get into?
No, I'm just gonna say, give pick six a chance. I'm gonna be doing at least $30,000 to $50,000 of pick six on Sunday. I'm gonna talk about that with Brooke. People haven't quite figured out this game yet, so there's a lot of opportunity to potentially win and have an edge. I think most people that play this game don't even realize that they're playing against other people. They think they're playing against the house, like they're on those other sites that basically just like the other two sites that should be unnamed basically just want suckers to kind of punt away their money at -30 or -40% house edges. That's not pick six. Pick six, you're playing against other people, and in these island games, focus on the payouts. Focus on maybe fading a guy that is going to be popular, hoping you can get that big payout. When it's the main slate, we'll talk about that Sunday morning. It's even easier. You just make some correlated lineups and some games you like, and let other people make mistakes. Because right now, I look through stuff and people are making mistakes.
You made a really good point about pick six on the main slate, which is the easiest way to go 6 for 6 is to stack. So quarterback, receiver, receiver, quarterback, receiver, receiver. And on the other sites, the other pick'em sites, doing that will get you a payout something like 13 to 1. And on pick six, the standard is going to be 21 to 1. So
I think it's even less than that.
They seem to be penalizing more and more every single week. So it's consistently changing, and it's never changing in a favorable direction. So
the other side are saying, don't do that to us, because they're basically taking your bet. The other side are saying, if you build a lineup like that, we're not going to pay you as much because we think you're going to win, right? If you build a lineup on those other sites that most people build on pick six, they'll pay you full amount. They're like, yeah, sure, go ahead. Yeah, you think you're so smart. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
You go ahead. You do that lineup. All right,
which is a great indication of the fact that we should be stacking here on pick six. So
yeah,
we had one
are ignoring pick six. Most people, a lot of the big players, I did a deep dive looking into the players on there, and there were some sharp players. I don't act like everyone on pick six is a dum-dum. No, there was a third of the lineups were very, very well constructed. And I didn't know who those people were, but those guys are definitely sharp. But some of the guys that I know are sharp that I play in those high stakes games, I didn't see them. One of them that I see sometimes was he just was, I don't know what he was thinking. So it's early. I'm not gonna say anything is easy to win, but I'll talk about it more Sunday morning. I am going way bigger this week on pick six on the main slate than I normally am. We'll see what happens.
I think, yeah, you said it well there. It's like it's not easy to win. It's easy to make lineups in pick six where the expected value is kind of through the roof because,
Exactly.
as you said, like so much of the field isn't doing it the right way, and you still have to get 6 out of 6 correct. So if all else is equal, like doing that 4 or 5% of the time, you're going to make a lot of money, right? So correlating, you can do it close to maybe even 10% of the time if you're really, really dialed in.
I was 0-6 last week, Alex.
Yeah.
Because my plays were terrible. Like, remember what I like? I like Deontay Johnson. I like Lad McConkey. Like, bad. Everything was bad. I got killed on the main slate. Killed. Like, minus 90, minus 95% on the main slate. I broke even at pick six.
Yeah.
And if I had taken the opposite of my lineups, I would have done real well because I had like 3 or 4 0-6s. I would have had 3 or 4 6s and O's. You know what I'm saying? Like, as long as you're 0-6 or 1-5 or 5-1-6, no, you just don't want to have a bunch of 3 3s, 2 4s, 4 2s. That shows you're doing something wrong.
Our guy Nico just asked a question, so we're going to answer this in a second. Anybody else, if you have questions about Showdown or main slate, drop those questions in here because then we're going to talk about. We had a request to go through who we think are the most viable, really, really cheap options on the Showdown slate. So we'll run through that. Then we're going to close it off with our slate breaker candidates for the main slate, and then we'll jump out of here. So if you have questions still, pop those into the YouTube chat so we can get to them before the show ends. Nico asks, Pat's onslaught a little bit too hopeful, and also thoughts on Rodgers' captain with 2 or 3 pass catchers. I'll start here by saying I think the Pats onslaught is a little bit hopeful, but there's also enough of a chance that production in the game as a whole is just so low that you get away with it. I think the biggest obstacle to it, though, is it'd be one thing if there were Patriots who are like pricey where maybe they had 2 studs of their own. But as it stands, like the likelihood if the Pats, let's say they scored 24 points or something like that, and that production is spread out, it's being spread out to such cheap Patriots that you still are probably going to want the raw total of Wilson, of Hall, somebody like that. So you'd have to get real leveragey kind of throughout the whole thing. And if you're going Pat's onslaught, you probably end up leaving more money on the table than I'm comfortable with. I have built some really strong 4-2 New England lineups instead of going to the full onslaught that I like a whole lot. And then thoughts on Rodgers' captain. Like, I think it's doable. It's just, again, even if you think they're going to have success through the air, unless you're expecting a bunch of explosive plays, things like that, I think you're better off taking one of the Jets receivers as the captain and then just include Rodgers as a flex. What do you think of these 2 questions here, TwoGun?
I actually do have 1-5-1 Patriots. It has a Breece Hall coming back. Like, when it comes to onslaught, you're still going to want to have Breece Hall, maybe Garrett Wilson at the cheapest. You're not like doing 55, you're not having like 90% of your salary on the Patriots. It's still like 80-20. It just happens to be a 5-1. So, yeah, it's possible to have a 5-1, but you're still going to want to have Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson on the way back.
By the way, too, you always do this where you talk about like the percentage of salary owned instead of just the number of players, which I think is so smart. In fact, we think it's so smart that Caleb and I have been discussing in all the Showdown data that we put into the articles where we look at like what percentage we think it's optimal to have X amount of Jets, X amount of Patriots. We're also going to try and incorporate that with salary owned. So I think that would be pretty cool as well to add. So hopefully that'll be in there soon, but big value add. And that would be all because you keep making this point on Showdowns and it's such a good point.
Yeah. And in terms of Rodgers as captain, I don't have Aaron Rodgers as captain at all because it generally makes more sense to just choose one of his wide receivers. And it's not like he's going to have running touchdowns or anything like that. So I do have Jacoby Brissett as a captain for a few, but not Aaron Rodgers. It just makes more sense to choose one.
Yeah.
But either way, like most of my lineups are heavier on the pass salary wise, maybe a 4-2, but I always have at least $10,000 on the Jets in this slate.
Makes a whole lot of sense to me. All right, let's get into it. Our slate breaker candidates. If you have 2 guys, 3 guys, doesn't matter. Why don't we go one at a time, and I'll let you start us off.
Well, one guy I know for sure. I know. I mean, we might change our minds, but I seriously doubt I'm going to get off of him is I got to go with Tyreek Hill. How can you not go for a guy that's this explosive and can break a slate at that low of ownership? You don't have to have him in every lineup. Just have him in a few lineups. To me, it's pretty straightforward.
I like that. I'm going to go Tony Pollard for my first one. I do think I'm going to need to see his ownership come down a little bit. I think the first run we had him around 12, 13%. I'd like to see him get under 10. If he stays at this number, I'll still consider him as a slate breaker. Obviously, at 12%, you can still break a slate. But I think the lower it goes, and particularly like the lower it goes in response to Charbonnet becoming more and more popular, you get that direct leverage in addition to the fact that he could end up really breaking the slate on his own. Just would make me absolutely love Pollard. And again, I really like the matchup for him, and I love the usage that we're seeing for him. And the number one thing I'd say about that is, remember, the production we've seen from him has come against two really, really difficult opponents. So whenever anybody's kind of looking at the stats, like what's Tennessee's offensive line yards produced at this point, what is Pollard's efficiency numbers look like, none of that is going to truly sell how well his role has been and how good he's looked on the field so far. So again, Pollard going to be my first one here.
I'll go with running back too, and it seems so obvious that it's kind of funny, but people roster him less than you think is Alvin Kamara. Everyone's going to say, no, if he can't do it again, even though it's a good high stakes game, people are going to probably want to be like, nah, it's not going to happen again. Maybe it happens again. Yeah. Of course, he's not going to be 2% used. He'll be, he'll be. I bet you'll see sub 20%, especially with all of this running back chop. He's not going to be less than 5%. He'll probably end up somewhere in between. Yeah, but he clearly can break a slate. Mm-hmm. And I think the Saints team's for real. One of those smart things I did in the offseason was those Saints features that I tweeted about.
I'm glad you brought up Kamara because I think he's a really good example of somebody who his ownership is super uncertain at this point. And the main reason being we don't yet have a good sense of how people are feeling about this, Rams receiving core and what's going to happen to George Kittle, because there is a chance that people pay down so often on this slate, particularly with just these like punt receivers from Los Angeles or potentially even now San Francisco, if Kittle's also out, that they would end up having plenty money to pay for Kamara, and he could end up being 30, 35%, something like that. But it could also go the opposite way where people don't feel comfortable with those punts and they want to get some more expensive receivers in their lineup. And then they're going to go to more of the mid-tier running back chalk, some of these cheaper running backs like Charbonnet, like Jordan Mason, and then Kamara could end up being 10 to 15%. So really, really wide outcomes right now for Kamara's ownership. So I like the call. Second one for me is going to be really off the board. I'm going to go to the Cleveland defense. I don't expect to go an entire season talking about a defense as a slate breaker, but they have a massive, massive smash percentage in our sim data. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. It's the Giants, right? Daniel Jones has looked atrocious. He's especially bad at diagnosing pressure. He's especially bad when under pressure. Cleveland's specialty is getting to the quarterback. So this is one of those rare matchups where I think a defense has slate breaking upside where, success for them isn't 12 fantasy points or 13 fantasy points. It's 22 or 23. And that might even be doable without a defensive touchdown. If they get into the end zone, they could push 25, 30 if absolutely everything breaks their way. And because they're an expensive defense, there's just no risk whatsoever that they get a ton of ownership. So Cleveland could be a real slate breaker here.
Yeah, it's funny because that's the other team I had features on, but I mean, well, it's funny because if there's a team I'd double down on at this point, it's probably Cleveland because, the Saints have obviously been, everyone's bid them up a little bit after their two big wins.
Yeah.
I kind of like Amari Cooper's because I never learned a lesson, but we'll see. Let's give it a few days, but we'll see where I land if I throw money down the drain on Amari Cooper, who keeps getting thrown at and not catching the ball because it's Deshaun Watson throwing the ball. Who knows? We'll see.
Are you going to say that Amari Cooper is your third slate breaking candidate then?
I wouldn't be shocking if I try him again, but I'm not going to commit to it. But
do you have any others, or do you want me to give my third one?
Say what? Sure, go ahead.
Because I actually thought you were going to take this guy, Nico Collins.
I heard Amari, yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, so first of all, he's already near the top of our GPP scores among wide receivers. I think he's second right now. But the other thing is we could end up seeing really big chalk on Cam Akers. The chalkier Cam Akers gets, the more I'm going to like Nico Collins. So third slate breaker there is Nico. And yeah, I mean, I just think it makes a ton of sense. He has already separated himself as the number one receiver in Houston the way I wasn't sure any of them were going to be able to do throughout the entire season. He has already done it.
Briggs would be more than he has, to be honest.
Yeah. He looks like he's already one of the best receivers in the league, not just the best of the three on Houston.
Yeah.
All right. I believe that'll do it.
Let's go Jacoby Brissett. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, let's hope for a really big showdown day. Again, we will be live on Sunday morning. That one is not free. That one's paywalled at 10 o'clock Eastern, but TwoGun will be live at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. That one is for free. That one's all about pick six. And then again, this has been a rare 7 o'clock show, but for the most part, every Monday, every Thursday, 5:30 Eastern, you can find us here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.